Opening slide with the OTAN logo, services, and social media information. For more information, please call OTAN at 916-228-2580. Before we begin today, when you hear the word copyright, how do you feel or how do you react? Welcome to Licensing Your Creations, Copyright and Creative Commons. This session is presented by myself, Penny Pearson, Coordinator, Distance Learning Projects. You can reach me at ppearson@otanus or via phone at 916-228-2580. First, a little bit about me. As I said earlier, I'm a coordinator with OTAN, but my previous lives include 12 years in the classroom teaching career technical educational courses and 14 years with OTAN. Prior to education, I worked several years in government and completed my high school education through distance learning, and at that time it was called correspondence school. I've also received certification from Creative Commons regarding open licensing. I'm an advocate for open educational resources and open licensing, but must state from the beginning that I'm not a lawyer and I can't give any legal advice. So let's begin, shall we? First, to get your own copy of this presentation, please visit my site through bit.ly/OTANpenny. That's bit.ly/OTANpenny. There are also many other additional resources available on that page as well. Today our learning goals are to work on defining and licensing open educational resources. Creative Commons is at the core of informing yourself about how you can use others' works and how you can inform others how you allow them to use your work. First, I'll briefly describe a new exciting project, then define Open Educational Resources, OER, and then we'll go over Creative Commons licensing and what that means for you both as a creator of materials as well as how you can use materials licensed in this way. Something good is coming. I'm happy to announce the Coop Exchange. This is a collaborative project between CASAS and OTAN for the California field of adult education teachers to share co-ops with each other. This online resource will be a collaborative space for sharing co-ops created by you and your colleagues. And as each one will be licensed in such a way, anyone can download and use these resources in the classroom. More information will be coming from CASAS, but this session will give you a head start on the new co-ops you and your team are creating for learners, and when complete, you can then upload them to the Exchange for others to use. If you are familiar with OTAN's Teaching with Technology site, you will see that the Exchange follows a similar format. According to the National Educational Technology Plan, an open education resource is an object that supports or facilitates teaching, learning, and research. It lives in the public domain, or it has been released under an intellectual property license, and this is most commonly referred to as Creative Commons licenses, but there are other names for it, and we'll explore Creative Commons licensing in greater detail in a few minutes. And that the license that's applied to an open educational resource allows for sharing, accessing, and repurposing. The slide gives the actual quote, but this gives you an idea of how open educational resources are defined. So after we define an open educational resource, then the question becomes, what can be an open educational resource? And it basically is pretty much anything. Anything that can be copyright protected can also be Creative Commons licensed or an open educational resource. So that includes podcasts, audio files, simulations, music, lesson plans, games, and all kinds of different applications or apps that can be used on mobile devices or tablets. So pretty much anything can be licensed as an open educational resource. So let's talk a little bit about public domain versus an open license. And so it may sound a little simplistic in a way, but we are dealing with a situation of intellectual property. And in my opinion, in the past, actions of intermediaries like lawyers and agents and others muddied the waters of what the terms of copyright really were meant to be. Ironically, copyright was first created as a means of sharing, but it got lost over the couple hundred years that it's been in effect. So if you can, think of public domain where there is a complete release of any claims of ownership. So they're completely waived. So if you want to find and use something released to the public domain, you can do anything you like with it. Okay? Where an open license is an object or an item or a resource that is still owned by and controlled by the original creator or owner, but they have granted certain rights to the public to revise or remix or reproduce and redistribute that work. Now, in order to do that, within that restriction, so to speak, there are 5 elements to what is considered an open license. So let's look at the 5 R's of openness. Now, this is defining an open educational resource. Now, to make it an open educational resource, it needs to have these 5 elements, okay? Retain, reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute. So let's say you are a creator of something and you are licensing it under these terms. So you have the right to keep that work and control copies of that content. So you are be able to retain it. The second R of reuse is that when you license it this way and another person uses it, they can use it in a class or a study group or on a website or in a video. They can also adapt it, they can adjust it, they can modify it, or in some way alter the content. So that may be that they translate it into a different language or they change the colors on a photograph. They can mix it with something else. So they can take that original work that's been licensed in this way and revise it with other material to create something new. So think of it kind of like a mashup. Also, the 5th R is to redistribute, the right to share copies of that original content, the revisions or your remixes with others. So it's like you can give a copy to a friend or a fellow teacher. So the 5 R's of open: retain, reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute. Now, usually when I do this presentation, I play this little video clip for you to learn more about what is an open license. In this format, it seems to be a little bit more of a challenge, so I'm not sure that you'll be able to click on this link in the presentation or in the video that you're watching. So if you can't, please go to my website, that one I mentioned earlier, bit.ly/O10penny, bit.ly/O10penny, and watch this video on that site, and then come back and finish the presentation. So the video just gave you a quick overview of licensing, but it really is all about the license. And on this slide, you'll see this graphic on the left side showing the most open license to the least open licenses. So these 6 licenses are basically modified copyright licenses. Remember, the owners still own their own work. It's still their intellectual property, but these licenses allow for permissions, and they're applied to textbooks, handouts, videos, podcasts, images, pretty much all the types of objects that you as teachers create for your learners. Those licenses that fall within this green zone are considered the most open, meaning that they offer the most flexibility for the 5 R's. Remember what those were? Retain, reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute. And this then allows the most freedom of using that material. Now, if any of these 5 R's are restricted, then the item is no longer considered an open license resource. Okay, it's still usable, of course, and most likely can be redistributed, but it cannot be revised or remixed. Then it becomes a great resource with certain copyrights or restrictions retained. Now this slide represents the typical icons of Creative Commons licensing. These marks help to show a user how those works can be used. So you're going to start seeing these more and more. They're going to be on web pages, presentations like this one, images, videos, podcasts, etc. So try to become as familiar with these icons as you can, so you know when you find a resource, you feel comfortable in understanding how that author is allowing you to use those works. Of course, if you're unsure if the license will allow you to do what you want to do with that resource, ask. Send a short little email, explain what you're trying to do, especially tell them that you're using it for education. In my experience and in talking with a lot of other teachers, when they ask for these kinds of permissions, the yes rate is in the upper 90s, so they do get the permission to use the materials. So the next slide will explain a little bit more about what these icons mean. So here, this slide is providing a little more explanation about those icons and the images that they represent. It's important to look at these licenses carefully. Does the license permit you to do what you want to do with the resource that you found? Revise it. Say, translate it into another language, add more to it, take out some parts, cut it into smaller pieces. As a creator, you must decide if a user can change your work or use it to make money. This is typically a question that causes a great deal of consternation among individuals who create OER. There's a fear that someone will make money off of my work, and it is an important consideration. Remember that the author still retains the copyrights on their work. And most producers would want to seek permission to use those materials commercially as a matter of courtesy, or to get access to materials held by that author to use more of your work. But be aware, open licenses do not require it. So culturally, we're moving more and more toward a sharing economy. This doesn't mean an individual that doesn't make a profit. It just means they are willing to share their own bounty or good fortune with others in a variety of ways. So as we look at these licenses, you can see there's these nice little check boxes here of saying, can someone use my work to make money? Can someone change my work? Those are typically the most important questions that people ask, especially creators. So as you look at this green box has two licenses circled, and you'll see there's a section up here at the top that marks them as free cultural works. These are the most open licenses. They adhere to those 5 R's that we've been speaking of. It requires attribution, all right? This means you need to give credit to the creator. So if I were to share my work with you, say this PowerPoint presentation, and you wanted to use it to inform your teachers, all that I would ask is that you give me credit that your work is based upon mine. Conversely, this one below it is Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike. So that means that if you take the work, you have to share it, or if I've said you must share it, then that's what you need to do. They can use my work to make money, and someone can change my work, but with this license, I'm requiring them that they have to license it to share it as well. These other licenses are pretty straightforward. They're attribution non-commercial, which means they cannot make money off of my work. That's why this little circle with the X through it. Can someone change my work? Yes, they can under this license. Non-commercial and attribution. Give credit, but you can't make money. This next one here is Creative Commons Attribution No Derivatives. That's what this equal sign in the circle means. They can use your work to make money, but they can't change your work. It has to remain intact. The other licenses here on the right-hand side is Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives. Okay. So that sounds like a lot, but it does tell you exactly how you can use the work. For example, on TED Talks, this is how they license most of their videos. You give credit to who did the presentation. You can't make money off of those videos, and you can't change that work. It does not mean that that work is not valuable and that you could not use it in your classroom. You can. You just have to follow the licensing attributes that have been applied to that work. And this last one here at the bottom, it's pretty much the same in the sense of you have to provide attribution. It cannot be used for commercial use, and someone can change your work. Also, it must be shared, right? That's what this SA means on this license. You must also share it. So that's a quick overview of licensing and the licensing icons through Creative Commons. Okay, so you create, now you need to license your work. So you may create your documents in Word or OpenOffice or PowerPoint or slides or any number of ways. You are responsible to decide how you want to give permission for others to use your work. So you're going to go to the Creative Commons licensing tool and get the mark that you need. So I'll show you how to do that. So you need to apply a license to your work. You're going to go to creativecommons.org. So that's creativecommons.org. And at the top of the screen, there's the option to share your work. You'll fill out the short form choosing the license options that you want. So it asks you, can someone else use your work? Do you want it share alike? And it will give you the text and the licensing icon for that license. You simply copy and paste that text or image into your document. Or if this is for a website, you can copy and paste the HTML code onto your web page. That's it. It's really straightforward. You just choose what you want others to be able to do with your work. Select it in the creativecommons.org Share Your Work licensing tool, and that's it. You've announced to everyone your permissions on how they can use your work. So for this EL Civics presentation, we're not doing this live, so I encourage you to write down your questions or comments and come join me in the live session. Check the schedule, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about licensing your work. A second challenge is for those of you that want to find works that are licensed under Creative Commons, and they are out there, billions of them. I encourage you to use the advanced searching options on your favorite search tool. And secondly, always read the license. I have a very large resource list that you can find different pieces and parts and places where you can search for open educational resources, and then also encourage sharing amongst yourselves. It is a long process in the sense of you have to get used to this whole licensing process and understand what those licenses mean. But once you do, you have a much better understanding on how the original author intended their works to be used. But the biggest piece of advice here, that as it says on this slide, always read the license. You need to have a full understanding of how you can use other people's work. So that's licensing in a nutshell. It's very brief, I understand, but I'm hoping that we can have a very rich conversation when we meet live together. Between now and then, I'd like you to reflect on these things. 3 things that you learned today, 2 things that you will share, and 1 thing that you will try. And I will ask you in our live conversation what those things were as part of this reflection tool. And I'd like to thank you for joining me today, but I cannot leave without telling you how you can use this presentation. You'll notice that I have my licensing statement here, and it is Creative Commons Attribution, which means that you are free to download, modify, remix, and redistribute this presentation. All that I ask is that you give me credit that you got the original information from me. And with that, I'll sign off, and I wish all of you a great day, evening, weekend, wherever you may be as you're watching this, and I look forward to talking with you during the live session. closing slide with the OTAN logo and training opportunities and social media. For additional information, please call OTAN at 916-228-2580.